Good afternoon, everybody. We're sitting as a council meeting this afternoon on Tuesday, May the 20th, 2025 at 5 p.m. It's a special council meeting to have the first opportunity to review our budget. I will call this meeting to order. And because it's a special meeting, of course, it's a shortened agenda. Item number 2 is the adoption of the agenda, and it's moved by Councillor Card, seconded by Councillor Crapper, that the agenda of the budget meeting on May 20th, 2025 be adopted as presented. Any errors or corrections? Call the question. All in favor? Item number 3, declarations of conflict or pecuniary interest. Seeing none. Item number 4 is we're going to go into a closed session for a brief period of time before the budget meeting. And the motion is moved by Councillor Crapper, seconded by Councillor Card, that council move into a closed session as permitted under the Municipal Act to consider personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal employees. Call the question. All in favor? Carried. And we are in. Okay, thank you. So we are back from our in-camera meeting, and it's moved by Councillor Aragon and seconded by Councillor Cardy. The council met in closed session to discuss matters pertaining to personal matters of an identifiable individual, including municipal employees. And council took no action beyond receiving the information from staff and consultants. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Good. Now that we've done that, I'm going to ask you again, Madam CAO, if you could put us on recess for a moment. We'll take a break to the public. It's about 12 minutes after 6. We will start the budget meeting at 6 o'clock. And I'll just announce I'm turning it over to you.
Right.
Okay, well, good, thank you. So thank you, welcome back. We're gonna now begin the formal part of our budget meeting on the public side. And Tammy, I'll turn it over to you. Go ahead, please.
Cameron, are you gonna put the power back? I believe the document was provided on your website.
There we go.
Okay, so, next slide, please. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present the draft 2025 budget. We will start with a bit of an introduction, probably more from the public perspective and talk about tax policy and assessments, fees and charges, and then move into the tax supported and rate supported budgets. As well as we do have some slides that talk about the tax impact on a typical property in the village of Westport. So next slide, please. So budget is a plan. It's very important for folks to understand that it is a plan and it should be a communication tool. Next slide. It should be integrated with your other planning pieces. So with your asset management plan, your strategic plan really should be an integrated approach. Many municipalities now are also moving to multi-year budgets, which I highly recommend that the village consider maybe during the next term of council. It does allow you to look at budgets in a more long-term fashion. Once you have your asset management plan, you'll be in a much better place to do that, including a long-term financial plan, which really identifies how you're going to finance your operations and your capital over the long term. So next slide, please. So the components of a municipal budget, your expenses less non-tax revenues equals the tax levy. And so your revenues come from various sources, fees and charges, grants, your reserves, which are not earned revenue in the current year. They're transfers for funding purposes, financing, which is debt from debt, which again are funding avenues, which again is not earned revenue, but rather a funding source. And then of course, property taxes being the largest revenue source for municipalities. On the expense side, you've got your assets and infrastructure, operating, financing, so debt servicing and others. Municipalities are legislated under the Municipal Act. They can only, you can only debt finance up to 25% of your own source revenues in terms of interest. So next slide, please. So the municipal budget, you've got your capital and operating. And so you'll notice this year that we have transformed your budget to look at it from those perspectives. And of course, you do have water, wastewater funds. So that is what's considered rate supported and should be supported within that fund. And of course, tax supported being from the property tax levy. And so in capital, you have the opportunities there to, once you look at, I know your development charges is another source of revenue for capital. Obviously, property taxes can also support that. Other financing includes, of course, debt financing, your current reserves, etc. So next slide, please. So really the budget challenge, the process is to rationalize your expenses to deliver the services. And that's why I say it should be integrated with what you're planning to do. So really my recommendation is you believe it or not, come the summer, you should be starting on your budget for next year. That should be your budget plan, your business plan. What are you going to do and how much is it going to cost you to deliver on that plan? It shouldn't be the other way around. It shouldn't be, this is the budget and what am I going to do with it, as opposed to, this is what we're going to do, this is how much it's going to cost. And maybe it is over a period of time, but that is the shift. And that's how you can move to a longer term budget. So we want to maximize the balance of non-tax revenues, and we'll talk a little bit about that, user fees in particular. Grants are I'll call them more like bonuses as opposed to something that you can rely on. And we know that, with changes in government, they're not something that you can rely on. So, looking at, different ways to raise funds, is important. And of course, the tax levy is what drives your tax rates, that together with the assessment of your properties. So you have control at the municipal level to determine that tax levy. The impact, the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation manages your assessments. And so that is unique to Ontario though. So in Alberta, they still do their property assessment at the local level. So that has changed, as we know, some time ago now. Some people think it was a good thing and some have other determinations, but we have what we have. So in terms of moving to a concept of operating capital, there are links obviously between the operating capital budget. Interest expense is an operating item. You do have, and really when you look at a longer term budget, you should be calculating how much operating costs or savings come from capital assets. And so looking at things a longer term and present value calculation of what your capital assets are going to cost you. So as you add services, obviously you have to replace those assets and you have to fund them over a long period of time. Sometimes that new assets actually will cost you less. So that should be included in your budgets moving forward. And then of course, reserve transfers. Reserves are equity that you currently have as opposed to earned revenue. So it's just basically, it's basically what's sitting in your bank account, what you're going to use that for. Now, one of the things that we have noted is that you do not have a reserve policy, which we are recommending in this budget. Reserve policy would identify for each reserve what the purpose of that reserve is. Is it restricted by council? And what are the targeted amounts that you would want that reserve to be sustainable? That is, you'll see at the end, but that is one recommendation that we are recommending. Tax policy in Ontario is complex. So I do want to highlight a couple of things, and I'm sure that every councillor has had some questions from the public on tax policy. So hopefully this will help. The legislative authority lies within the Municipal Act in terms of policies and calculations of taxation, whereas the Assessment Act regulates the approachment to assessment. As I mentioned, impact being that jurisdiction. It is funded by municipalities through a levy, and this year's levy from impact is $226 million. They have a calculation that they use for large, medium, and small municipalities to determine how much that is, okay? And so, yes, as a smaller organization, you don't actually pay, obviously, the same amount for the city or Ottawa. So the initial, if there was a dispute about an assessment, you can ask for a request for reconsideration to impact. If there's an appeal, it goes to the Assessment Review Board. You can be a party as a municipality to those appeals, and I recommend that you do so, because that is going to impact what tax levies you are going to receive. So components of the tax, property taxes, obviously the tax levy is the difference, basically, as I mentioned, between your expenditures and your non-tax revenues, as well as other revenue sources. The assessment, as I mentioned, is your current value of the property, and I will say that it's not really the current. So they call it current value assessment, but in fact, actually your 2025 assessments are based on 2016 values. So the reassessment has not occurred. That was planned. Tax ratios are basically the ratio comparison to the residential tax. So your commercial, farmland, multi-residential, industrial are all in comparison to the residential tax. So typically they are higher. And so immediately a commercial taxpayer will say, well, that means I'm paying more than a residential taxpayer. Their actual assessment is not done on the same basis, however. So it's not really apples to apples. It's an important piece to remember. The weighted assessment, basically, is the mechanism to allocate the tax levy to the different classes. Okay, so the tax rates are the amount of tax per dollar of assessment. There are some restrictions. You are not restricted on your levies, but up until 2008, there were levy restrictions if your ratios were above the provincial average, which is also a misnomer. It was never an average. So you don't have any levy restrictions, but there, you know, every sort of period of time, the government comes up with different policies and legislative requirements. So the levies, of course, are determined by municipalities and the county in your case, because you are a two-tier, and the ratios actually represent the apportionment between the tax burden. No longer, you don't have any properties that are capped anymore. They were in the commercial industrial classes. So they determine the weight, and you must move to the ranges of fairness. Again, you're all below the ranges of fairness. Basically, what happened was when the province first introduced these in 1998, there was a transition to try to move the commercial tax rates down closer and closer to the residential taxes as a incentive for business. That's really what the reason was. And so now you are basically at, next slide, you don't have any restrictions. You know, one of the things, all of the tax ratios are in a two-tier government are the purview of the county. That doesn't mean that you wouldn't have influence, but the county does make your decisions around the tax ratios. So as a lower tier municipality, you would have to sort of negotiate, I guess, with the county to try to change any of those. So if you wanted to try to encourage business, as an example, and by reducing your tax ratio closer to the residential, you would have to have the county do that. In a single tier, the single tier municipality has control over tax ratio. So tax rate for the class is basically the residential tax rate multiplied by that ratio for the class. And so next slide. So you will see that your the range of flexibility you're at the in terms of your ratios are already below the range, what's called the range of flexibility. So you are not subject to any levy restrictions on any of your classes. Now, you don't have any properties in the village in the industrial or the pipeline class, just in the commercial, and so commercial properties are assessed at 1.346 times the residential tax rate. Next slide, please. So the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville tax ratios, you'll see, and what this does tell you is that the percentage share for your taxes at 79% are borne by the residential taxpayer. And then multi-res is a small portion of that. 17% are from commercial occupied. There are excess land and vacant land, which are the tax rates are at reduced rates, 35%. And then you do have some payments in lieu. And actually you have one that was just added as a used to be an exempt property that is now a taxable property on your assessment roll in 2024. So that's a good thing. It was moved away from being exempt from tax. Next slide. Properties are assessed, as I said, from impact. The current value assessment, residential is done by sales comparison approach. So they look at comparable properties and sales. So everybody's going to say if they look at, and being a former treasurer, I used to get calls and they'd say my tax assessment is too high, and I'd say, well, would you sell it for that? And they'd say no. So the assessments are low because they are 2016 rates. So obviously the concern from everybody is that they're going to eventually do a reassessment. That doesn't mean that taxes are going to go up. Okay, because the assessment goes up, it's your tax levy with the assessment that will determine how much the tax rate is. And so in some cases, they might go down, depends on what your taxes are. So just because your assessment goes up does not mean that taxes are going to go up. Income approach for commercial and cost approach for industrial. So it is a different basis. And so one of the things that should be on the radar of municipalities is with economic changes. If it's commercial is done on an income basis and there is challenges in the economy, those assessments could decline or depending on the economy. So they do change, and it's important for folks to understand that it is a different basis. It's not like a commercial property just going to sell, and that's what the assessment is based on. It's based on an income approach. Next slide, please. So I was a treasurer when they used to do assessments every year. That was not popular because it changed all the time, and I had to have the same conversation we just basically had. Just because the assessment changed didn't mean that your taxes were going to change. So as you can see here, the assessment was supposed to occur in 2020. And in August of 2023, the province announced that it was not going to reassess. And so right now, there are 2016 values. So we all know that the real estate market has gone crazy in some scenarios. So, the anticipation is that the sales approach is going to have an impact on that property assessment. While the current value assessment is 2016, obviously you have, every time you have an added property or a supplemental property, and they're going to assess based on comparable properties in the sales realm. So your current value assessment of new properties may be closer to current values than the existing. In the last reassessment, of course, the assessments changed, but they were phased in. And that's probably what will happen again. I'm just speculating with my crystal ball, but likely that will end up being the approach that MPAC takes. There was lots of pressure during the times when they were changing every year, that there was too much fluctuation, both on the point of the taxpayers as well as the municipalities that had more control over that. So next slide, please. So there's actually 304 property classes. You don't have them all, lucky you. But there was a new property class that was introduced in 2021, which many municipalities have entertained, and that's the new small business class, to try to encourage small businesses to come into the municipalities. So that is an optional class. It's something for the county to be considering. So next slide. So this is a little slide I put together to try to explain how taxes are calculated. So number one, which is what we're here today, is to establish the levy requirement. Okay, you do have that control. That's the difference, as I said before, expenditures less non-tax revenue equals the levy requirement. Last year's levy was 1.29 million. And so we based everything from that. Your growth is not included in that. We'll talk about that. Taxable assessment times the tax ratio gives you your weighted assessment. And then of course the levy requirement is then divided by the weighted assessment to come up with what's the residential tax rate. From that tax rate, you multiply the tax ratio. So in your case, 1.346 for your commercial to come up with the tax rate for the commercial class. So it looks simple when you put it that way. Next slide, please. So your 83% on current value assessment, your 83% is in residential. That includes, and then we've got other, which is multi-res and commercials at 15. So that's current value, not weighted. Next slide. So what has happened, you've seen some growth, obviously, in your residential tax base has seen some growth in assessment. Anybody who's ever had a new home knows that it takes MPAC a couple years before the assessment gets put on the roll. And it's unfortunate because of course, then they get a nasty, what they call a nasty surprise, that they haven't been paying taxes for the period of time. And then they get a big omitted tax bill. And unfortunately, that is, continues. But they did put, some pressure on them and they have been much better. I can tell you that there was, back in the day when they were reassessing all the time, it was often 3 years. But as a treasurer of a municipality, there's nothing that can, the treasurer can be in touch with MPAC to try to get them to move it forward. So if they know that there's occupancy has been issued, why isn't it not on the tax roll? That there's nothing wrong with a treasurer reaching out. I used to do it all the time, especially with our big commercial property. So, you have seen some growth. Next slide, please. So the next slide shows that literally from your, total tax base, 2024, between the beginning of the year and what went on the roll, your, change in annual taxation went up $73,000 simply from the added roll. So that was your growth in 2024. It actually, in comparison to your last year's levy, is actually 83,000, I believe it is. So the levy that you had from 2024. Next slide, please. So I understand that obviously you've got a new subdivision. We were able to determine what is on the roll based on the phases of the subdivision. That was actually Kim found these pieces. So you've got 45 properties that have been added onto the roll as of the return roll at the beginning of 2025. And that represents $15 million in current value assessment and $167,000 in annual municipal taxes. Next slide. So how much is that? Well, that represents 13% of your total CVA now, current value assessment, and similarly your current taxes, so based on 2024 rates. Next slide. So painstakingly, I got your building permit information. And there's actually only 3 properties that have been issued a building permit that had a roll that is not on your roll. So, however, the amount as the current value assessment that is on the roll for many properties in 2024 and 2025 was only based on the land, not the building. And so what I estimate, and please do not hold me this number, okay? This is an estimate. The new properties that have not been added, you'll see that there's about 300. I looked at what's on the roll versus the project value on a building permit, which of course is not necessarily what your assessment. So that's very conservative. Based on those additional properties, we estimate that it's about $45,000 annually that would be added to the roll based on what is currently in building permit activity. That does not include any supplemental. So those would be omissions. That doesn't include supplementals. So additions, renovations that add value to a current property, I did not estimate. I can't even tell you how you could take the property value of the building permit and do an estimate, but I wouldn't hazard a guess on that. And how long it takes, I will tell you, I personally built a second building on my property. I think it was 3 years before they came out and did anything with it. So it does take time, but I did want you to see that there is some value that has not been met the role.
Thanks, Tana.
Next slide. Another piece that's important from a managing your assessment is reconsiderations, which are requests by MPAC. I haven't very rarely seen, and I'm gonna say never, but I've never seen a request for reconsideration by MPAC actually increase the assessment. So typically they will decrease the assessment by some amount if they grant it at all. And appeals can go both sides. Since 2006, and you have had a reduction in assessment of $6.2 million from reassessments and reconsiderations. So it is important as a municipality to become party to especially significant appeals of assessments. And some organizations will actually hire like a tax equity consultant to represent the municipality on their behalf. So that's important to watch for. It's not significant, obviously, but for a small municipality, it's important to watch this. Next slide. So in looking at today's budget, $12,294 would be considered a 1% tax levy change from last year's tax levy of 1.229. Because of growth, actually a 0% tax rate change would result in $84,138. So if we kept the tax rate exactly at the current tax rate, you would end up with $84,000 in additional taxes. Okay.
That's awesome.
And fees and charges, next slide, fees and charges. We did not specifically review your fees and charges this time. I do, next slide. This is their second single source of revenues. It is recommended that you look at your fees annually as part of the budget process. It does not appear from what I can find that there has been truly a true fee study done for the village in very long time. And when I say that, it's looking at the true cost of operating and determining what the fees would be to cover that. Not saying that you would set your fees at that, but you should know how much it is to deliver those fees and then make a determination, a policy around, because really what it is it's a subsidy, because it would mean that the taxpayers are paying for the difference. So you would not have been able to do a full cost fee study the way your current financial system is set up. So that does need to change, which we're recommending in terms of the chart of accounts so that you can actually do a proper fee study, which is why we're suggesting it'll be 2026. I would recommend that you look at that. And so typically what I would say is you bring that to council and you say, okay, and I will tell you this right now, I do not know any arena that is operating at full cost recovery. So I'm not suggesting that, but it is important that council know how much that is. Similar, you've got a beautiful harbor. How much is actually, what are the fees and how much is being subsidized? There's benefits to subsidizing those things. Those are part of your culture and your business. But it should be based on an understanding of what it truly is costing you to do that. So next slide is about the historical deficit. As was brought forward to council, I don't know the exact date, I've got the link here. I think it was late fall 2024. It was discovered that there was a deficit in the wastewater area from the large subsurface disposal system. So because the 2023-2024 financial statements are not complete, the actual number is estimated to be about 250,000. At this point, it's considered unfunded. And so we're recommending that as soon as those financial statements are finished, as well as the reserve balances are validated, to come up with a recommendation on how that would be financed. Would it be self-financed through your reserves? Would it be through a debt issue? And so we're recommending that be brought forward this summer. And obviously, as I recommended really start looking at doing your budget for 2026 in the fall and include the implications for that. And so that's our recommendation. So analyzing the funding and bring forward that financing strategy. It also, at that time, you should have your asset management plan or early fall as well. So that should be done at the same time in terms of your financing. I think at that point, we should break.
Okay, so that was a great briefing. Thank you very much. I'm sure that members of council had heard it before, but you could probably hear it 20 times and learn something. So before we move into the numbers themselves, any questions today? Go ahead, Councillor Cropper.
One of the pieces you did a great job with in this is sort of half of what I've been looking for, which was to do with growth. And so what we predicted is revenues from growth. I'm not seeing predictions of costs associated with growth, like what it will cost us to when the roads become our responsibility. And I'd like to know when that's going to be so that when we planning for a budget a year in advance, what are the timelines for those things and how much is the bill? So parkland, if we get parkland, what it's going to cost the taxpayer, stormwater ponds, any of those sorts of things. Is that reasonable to expect?
Yeah, through your,
Yeah, go ahead.
so what you're describing is what I call a service level review. And hence why I'm recommending that you look at longer term budgeting. You're very correct. It's not just, certain adding any services are gonna have implications in terms of operating costs, but also capital, longer term. And that's really what a long-term financing strategy, entails. You don't have the information to do that yet, because unfortunately, the way your financials are structured at this point does not lend itself to that. That would be sort of activity-based costing to say, okay, how much does it cost to do a kilometer of road in terms of snow plowing? All of that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
You need that background. But that is what we're suggesting in terms of that integration of a longer term plan.
Okay.
Okay.
So just to follow up on that, then the struggle I have then is it's somewhat misleading to talk about revenues from growth, because that's all, that could potentially be more than that to pay for the growth. And that's where I'm uncertain. Those are the question. That's the key question I get from the taxpayer. Is it possible that growth is going to cost the current taxpayers more? It's hard to say no without numbers to justify that. It's a good news story that there's $85,000 or whatever it is to the good from the straight tax revenue, but clearly, right, we're talking about, we need more snow removal equipment as it is for the additional road clearing needs we have.
But I think it's a great question to ask Tammy, because there will be some suggestions of different plans or pieces that we need to put in place to understand that better.
Mhm.
And if you hadn't asked that question, we might not have understood how it's all gonna integrate. And it sounds like it's gonna integrate late 25, early 26. So the people who are asking, now we don't have an answer yet, but we know what we need to put in place to get the answer. I got that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if I may, your worship, one of the biggest failings I've seen in many municipalities is their asset management plans are focused on existing assets only. They don't look at what is required future. And actually, if you look at some of the big very growing cities, they look like they've got fantastic road networks. They've got 80% in good to very good condition. Well, that's because they've been adding a lot of new roads that are in great condition.
Mhm.
But on average it works, but the math, actually, if you were to look at the really bad roads that people are complaining about, they're still bad. So, you do have to be careful, and that's why I said, when you look at your asset management plan, you've got, existing versus that growth, and you do have to look at what's the financing plan for both of those things.
Yeah,
For sure.
that's really, really helpful. Councillor Craig.
Yeah, just going back to the first part of your presentation there, one question I get a lot is, why do you have to do a study on everything? We've all learned that studies aren't cheap, even a little study is a lot of money, but I did notice that in your first presentation there, that you pretty much said that you shouldn't be just taking a wild shot in the dark. You should good practice is to do the study, pay the money and get good information. Is there any place that's mandated? I know it's good practice. It's a sensible thing to do, but are we being told, that we have to do that? I mean, so if we wanted to apply for a grant, no way of getting it if you don't have the information, I understand that. But, our roads foreman comes and says, I want a new truck and I'm gonna have another 3 kilometers of road this year, and the old one's got like 300,000 kilometers on it, and blah, blah, blah. There should be some background information there is what I'm getting at. I see that seems to be part of your thought process, is that you're not gonna make a decision without good information, so.
Yeah, through you, your worship. The biggest, problem that you have at this point is you do not know how much things cost you. And that's when your question was about mandated, the asset, management regulation has mandated life cycle costing. So, when you look at something like, I'll use vehicles because they're very simple to explain. When you look at a life cycle cost of an asset like a vehicle, and you have that historical cost, you can start to show, well, maybe it is going to be cheaper to get rid of that vehicle than putting good money after bad, because you have that life cycle cost. But if you're operating on an annual budget basis only, without that history, you don't have full cost. And the other piece that that many municipalities, I'm warning against, is that if you do in-house capital, one of the most important things is to ensure that your costing for that in-house capital, whether it be labor, equipment, get charged to those capital jobs. Because what the province does is they look at your FIR, your financial information return, and they look at the value of your assets. And I have many clients in this boat that they have not charged out their in-house labor and in-house equipment. So they're comparing apples to oranges, because if you hire a contractor and they're charging you $150 an hour for a dump truck, and you're just using your dump truck without charging it, your assets are undervalued. And the OSIP, OMPF and OSIP funding are all now based on that. So if you're looking for the stick is our asset management plans. So, and you need to have the systems and the financial processes in place to do that properly.
Okay. Councillor.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So when we're looking at our asset management plan, we want to plan ahead. Is there like a percentage of growth that we don't know about that we should be projecting? Like, is there a magic number for that growth that we don't necessarily know about?
Well, through you, Mayor, that comes from your official plans, and your strategic plans. That really is what should be driving that. When you look at your official plan and what your potential growth, that's a driver. All of your other studies, actually, your water wastewater study is an indicator of growth. Your development charges, those studies do give you those forecasts. They're done by economists. And they are projecting your growth based on what they see in other jurisdictions, and they do look at those strategic plans that you have. I don't know if that's helpful, but.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Argona.
Just through you, Madam Mayor. I just have one question going back to the fee study, and we've been talking a lot about studies, so. I've sort of always been wondering what it costs to actually deliver some of the services that we offer in multiple areas. I don't remember if you said it when you were talking about that on the slide, but at what point, given what you're doing with the municipality's financial review, at what point do you figure that we are going to be able to have the information we need to do that fee study?
Through you, Mayor. So one of the biggest steps that has to occur is to get your financial, we'll call it the chart of accounts, and processes to start charging out your time. Now, it does take time to charge out time. So it is something that some people will balk at, but I will tell you that back in the day, and I mean, my clients have been around for a while, Ministry of Transportation forced every municipality to charge out their time and their costs. And then when all of that funding fell away, municipalities, some decided not to do it anymore. And so it's been a very unfortunate, because people thought, oh, it's a waste of time. But in actual fact, all of that time, allocating time and cost to activities was your indicator. So it is going to take some time before you can do that. We are going to get your financial system and processes put together this year to do that. And then some of those process changes will have to occur. So your first round would probably be fairly rudimentary, because you wouldn't necessarily have, you know, your equipment rates, et cetera. But that's why I'm suggesting that for next year, so you'd have a year's worth of information that you can start down that road.
Nice. I was in a conversation today, it was policing conversation, and just, it takes time. So police have been doing it for as long as I can remember, and it was, the OPP used to call it, it was a paper copy back then, and it was a daily activity report and a DAR, and you remember that, and, but it was every 15-minute block.
Yeah.
You've had to fill in what you did. And if you think of the way that we pay our OPP bills, now you can understand just how important it is, because what are you doing in the municipality? What are you doing in the provincial mandate? So if you're a public order uniform constable and you're running a patrol zone in Westport, and there's a situation in Ottawa that they call you to respond as part of a public order, you know, Westport doesn't want to pay for that time, so that's captured on, you know, whatever form they use now, of course, it's electronic. But I had never thought until that question, us doing it here, and it makes total sense. However we build that, it makes total sense. Yeah, good question. You have another one? Can you outdo that question?
No, I'm gonna enjoy that one for.
Councillor Card, then Councillor Cracker.
Just to comment on your, Mayor Jones, where I worked, we actually did that. We broke everything out into 15 minutes, right down to floor sweeping. You had, basically, you're looking for productive time and unproductive time, so, still costs company money, but you're not making any money if you're sweeping the floor, and you are if you were, you know, manufacturing, doing the thing we do. It wasn't that complicated after everybody got onto it. It was, and at the end of the week, as a manager, I could go and see, you know, your unproductive time's getting out of control here. You got too many people sweeping floors, the place is too clean, you gotta, you know, you gotta get on sales to get some more business, all that kind of stuff. So I really think it's a good idea. It could be a simpler thing, it could be half-hour blocks, depending on, you know, what the function is, but I think it'd be a worthwhile effort for a period of time anyway, to give some background as to how things really work.
For the asset management plan.
On property classes, I was wondering where waterfront fits in. I think that most people think that waterfront properties are a different class and are taxed differently. They're just valued more highly, and so they cost more tax. Okay.
So they're part of the residential class,
Yeah,
assuming that residential, it's just that the, and that's probably where the impact gets the most challenges, is the comparable properties. You know, if you've got a swamp versus the Big Rito, you know, they're comparing a swamp to this place in the Big Rito, that's where they get the most challenges.
But a bill will say residential non-waterfront. So that's just to clarify that it isn't
Yes.
additional premium on value because of the water.
Yeah, there are subclasses that will have the features.
Right.
So
okay,
that's where
thanks.
you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just so that they can do those comparisons.
Yeah, no, that's
Yes,
helpful.
yeah.
Another thing, it really helpful for the public, I think, because one of the things I got through the presentation was to do with single tier, upper tier, lower tier differentiation. And there's a lot to do with that. And that's another study we're undertaking. And I think it reinforces the reason why, because there's a lot of variance to do with how one, you know, what our relationship with the county is. So
Absolutely.
Well, Okay, we're gonna, go on question, then we're gonna dive into the numbers.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Crapper was asking about the classes. It reminded me that I wanted to ask if you could just give me a little bit more on the new business class, small business class option. What exactly is that and how does it factor into, to the equation here?
To you, Mayor. So it is an additional optional class in the commercial, actually it's commercial and industrial classes. And that allows municipalities who have the ability to change tax ratios to, usually it would mean a lower tax ratio for a small business class. So the properties would get put into that class and they would pay a different rate than large businesses. So it is a tax ratio and it's a determination by the upper tier to
Is that have been used in the past by municipalities to attract new businesses? Is that?
No, it's usually to attract businesses. They say, okay, we've got our, say in your case, here's 1.346 is your commercial. And you might have one or two very large commercial businesses and then the smaller ones are pontificating that their taxes are high and they might go to a different, and it is a competitive business, the municipalities, never used to be. But they're saying, oh, well, maybe we'll move to a different municipality, which of course commercial businesses could easily do, because their tax rate is lower. And so it put those particular properties into that subclass. And so then the municipality that has the ability to change tax ratios could use that to attract small business into their community.
Thank you.
Interesting. Good question again. I'm gonna quit while you're ahead.
I'm done.
All right, team, next slide, and let's, at least let's get through a slide, and before we go to a next slide, we'll check in if you've got questions.
Okay, so the operating budget, being tax supported, which means property taxes as opposed to rates. And in those, the key changes that have been included in the budget, utilizing a 2.6% increase in inflation, which was based on the CPI of August of last year, when the staff put together the I don't know if there's some policy that the village had that they would use August. I don't know what the rationale is.
It's ringing a bell, it's ringing a bell.
So,
It might be the only policy.
Right.
but it's ringing a bell.
I did read it, and so
Yeah,
that's fine. I will tell you, there are different CPIs, but anyways, that's another discussion. So in salary and wages, which I think the staff will highlight here, is around changing some positions and moving some positions to contracted services. That does also include the review of the organization in that contracted service. As well, in contracted services is your asset management plan, which is divided between tax supported and rate supported, because of course your asset management plan is also covers water, wastewater. Your long-term debt interest is actually an increase of $15,000. And actually is an increase to your levy from last year, not your actual expenses, as I had determined that the actual amount that was in the levy was not equal to what your interest was.
Okay.
So your principal repayments are going down because you have paid off some loans.
Great.
A couple of areas that have seen some increases in costs around, and I think your public works manager will highlight here, hydrant maintenance, recycling contracts. Your OPP contract did increase 12,000. You've got some aging vehicles that are in actual fact, the increase in the budget is about 10,000, but in 2024, your costs were actually at 50K in the fleet area. The budget was only like 35,000. So you are seeing some increases in costs of some aging vehicles there. Your capital expenditures are going up based on the recommendations, and that is supported 200,000 by the tax supported. So the way that the budget has been created here is to show you how much is being transferred from your operating to fund capital. So, that represents $208,000.
Okay, anything on that page, team? Are you, if not, you can come back to it when you get to the subcategories. Okay, we'll keep moving.
So just a summary by category, so this will show you, and these are the financial information return categories we've presented by, to show you the overall, so your last year's tax levy was 1.229 million. But as I mentioned, you actually, based on your current assessment, would have raised 1.313 million. So that's where the 84,000 additional comes from. So based on the recommendations in this budget and the operating, including the transfer to capital, works out to an additional $80,000, representing 6.15%. I think there's some, and basically from the previous slide, identified some of the major changes that you'll see there. So contractual services, I highlighted your salary and wages. And of course, the transfer to capital is significantly higher than it was last year for your capital projects.
It's just amazing what growth can do, because we've never had that here, right? We've never been able to have a 13.5% change in cost, but the impact is 6.1 or whatever, wherever the counselors leave it today. And that was my editorial comment.
And I do, your worship, I do believe, and the staff can jump in, I think they have tried to anticipate the extra costs to managing the growth in these costs,
Okay.
including
Good.
salary and wages and maintenance, et cetera. So I don't know if Peter wants to.
Quick question from Councillor Card, and then we'll come to you, Peter.
Just a broad description of recoveries. I can guess at some of them, but can you expand on that? Just what's included in that item?
Through your.
Yes.
So recoveries are the things that you do on behalf of someone else. So I believe, Peter, there's a couple of in terms of, private sector or.
Winter control.
Yeah, might want to highlight those, but they're basically work that you do on behalf of someone else and you get recoveries for it.
Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, so, I guess through your worship, so not as much as I'm looking forward to, talking about the, actually coding time to projects is something that has been a historical sore point, and it's something that's gonna be a big deal for making sure we're actually accounting for each of that as far as time is concerned. However, with that not being done on the accounting side, we do that as much as possible on based on the operations side, between the Excel sheets from all future subdivision plans and the network that those apply to. So each year we've projected how many lane kilometers we'll do, and we know quite accurately how much salt we use, how much time it takes to plow, and that's something that guided our recommendations to add that second unit to the fleet. And then that does account for growth as much as possible.
Okay.
We've done staff planning years ago, but we also allow for some redundancy for the existing rate payers as well.
Okay, good. Thank you. Anything else on this slide, team? Okay,
Next slide. So the, I think
you're on the FIRs now.
Yeah.
There you go.
So one of the things that we've made changes to in terms of budget is to put your all of your transactions into and the groupings into the financial information categories. They do have to be reported in this way, and this just shows you what the net levy requirement is by FIR category. So it is a bit of a change from what I think you've seen before, but it is supposed to be reported in this way. And there's actually, it's bizarre, there's like, I don't know, 70, 80 schedules in the FIR. And that are broken down by the same categories that I showed on the last one. So this just shows you where your levies are going to. And obviously, it's tax supported versus your rate supported, which will show a zero. So, because it has to cover it. So that's the difference. Next slide, please.
Oh, Councillor Carney?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering about this health services.
Yes.
If we could just touch on that some more, just more information for it, Kevin.
Yeah, so, you have a couple of, council grants that fall into those categories. So I put this in here because, it is, so in your FIR, you should be reporting that you have made a grant, like for the Maple View Lodge, that goes in, health
Gotcha.
services.
Okay.
Okay, and I think there's also, for the hospital, grants.
Smith Falls Hospital.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Oh,
So those belong in those categories.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Okay,
Next
but-
slide.
Yeah.
Actually, I think I'll answer it here. So, what I've done, I have made a bit of a manipulation because of the way you have always traditionally reported on council donations. So they are shown in the general government, but they would get charged to health and social services. So in general government, that includes, under the FIR, is council, so governance, corporate management, and program support. Now, one of the things that, in historical, your facilities and fleet management belong in what's called program support and is supposed to be allocated out to the departments. That has not been done in the past. So that's why you'll see, general government actually includes, program support. So anything to do with facilities, just the bricks and mortar, taking care of facilities belongs in what we call program support and is supposed to get allocated out. So it's actually, managing this building, for example. Okay?
Okay.
So this highlights some of the changes in terms of the salary and wages, which are primarily in the general government piece. They have been allocated out to water wastewater though, in some cases, because it is rate supported, so some of the contracted services. And then you'll see the note at the bottom that, yes, the council grants for health and services, social services are included in this slide, although they do fall in health and social services. And then the council grants are waived fees for ice time and those kinds of things. And so they've been itemized. And I think if you have any specific questions, we can identify those.
Go ahead.
So through you, Mayor Jones, we had talked last discussion around the council grants things because we were, and now I've heard this idea of getting actual data on what the costs are. That said, with 30,000 sitting there, are we comfortable that that number is relevant? It's a high number if what we're doing is saying that it's a burden to the taxpayer to look after. But I think it's, likely, it's a lot higher than what the actual costs, I believe anyway, it's a lot higher than what the actual costs are to, say, run the meeting room above the arena for the groups that use it, kind of thing. So if you recall, we were going to have staff come back to us with what the actuals were so that the budget could reflect closer to actual than the $30,000 allotment.
Right, this isn't a hit for the public though, right? Like in the way that this is here, there's not $30,000 worth of tax dollars being pulled out. It's cost avoidance.
Well,
Yeah, I hear you.
yeah,
I
if
hear you.
that
And that's
number was,
another report that we're
Yeah.
expecting. So if your
30,000,
question,
yeah.
is the report coming?
that's part of it, but I guess more relevant, and I guess through you
We won't know
to
until we get
Tracy.
the report.
No, but if that 30,000 weren't there, the number down below would be $30,000 less. And our, the revenues and the expenses would change, and it would change the net result of would it not? Am I confused on that?
Yeah, through your chair, Mayor. So, there have been, and maybe Kim wants to talk about it, identified specific, fees that are waived. And it basically means that you're not earning the revenues on
You're
that
avoiding
piece.
it, yeah.
So, yes, it is, I would say it's revenues you're not gonna earn. So,
Right.
but, Kim did, provide a detail, I do have it in front of me, but, in terms of the, and it was calculated based on, so ice time, Rio's practice, I don't know, all these storm field time. So they have been identified individually. I don't know if, Kim, you were.
No, and I'm okay not going to that level of detail. We are going to do a study to get our heads around the actual costs of these, and so we'll have accurate numbers moving forward. And if it's
Yeah.
gonna be nickels and dimes to this year if we change that, so. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, okay, move on. Anybody else, anything on this page? Councilor,
Just to top up on Councillor Crabber's statement there, that would be covered in our rates and fees study, but not the value of that $30,000. And that would also incorporate, capital costs, all expenses against the building, staff. That's the way I've always looked at, as real costs, not the $50 an hour, but what it costs to keep that building operating for that hour. So that would be covered in our rates and fees. We'd have a good number then.
it's hard to get the data. We've just had that, I stole your thunder, I'm sorry. Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And I just wanted to further that through you, Madam Mayor, to say that that's where we've, really captured your request for that analysis is through their recommendation for
Awesome.
that. piece.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
so if it's recommended for 2026 though,
Mhm.
I don't plan on bringing anything ahead of that.
I hear you.
Okay.
Okay, we're good? We
Yeah.
don't even want a song and a prayer, we want good data. Okay, anything else on this page? Okay, go ahead. I know it's painful, but if we go page by, we will eventually get to where they say nothing on a page.
Oh, it's not.
But I don't want to deny them first blush through the opportunity.
I've been
Okay.
through, I've done lots of.
Well, the
Not
public,
painful
the
at all.
public's probably at home going, oh. Are you really going page by page? We're at 41 out of
Yeah.
83 for people to know.
We'll
So
be
this
quick.
was a little different though, tax supported, you want to talk about this?
Yeah, so protective services includes your emergency services, obviously, and that's the primary impact is your OPP contract. In this, which is the 12,000. So, so out of that, that's actually 7.6% of the change is your OPP contract.
Better than last year.
So I don't know what else to say there.
We had lots to say last year.
I'm sure.
Councilor Aragona.
Through you, Madam Mayor. It shows the OPP lower rate than I remember seeing a briefing note about. So I'm just wondering, did something happen?
You saw what?
The OPP rate, I guess it's not really a question for you. The OPP rate, I thought in the briefing note said it was gonna be 27.2%
Yeah.
higher. So did something happen?
Now, this is not like you, not to be on top of an issue. And Councillor Crapper is smiling at you because he knows what happened.
Okay, so maybe Councilor can answer the question.
No, I won't put him on the spot. Solgen gave a significant amount of money to all OPP contract locations to cover the case where they held everybody to 1%. They lost that case, so that was part of the significant increase for OPP as well as the COLA. So this happened soon after we heard the word that it was going to go up so exponentially. So that is the right amount that you've got. There you go.
Thank God.
I have a different question.
Please go ahead.
And this is related fire services. Can you refresh my memory? Perhaps this is through you, Madam Mayor, to Kim, to the CAO rather. When is that contract coming up for renewal?
I'm not too sure. Let me check. I believe it's a 5-year renewal period and it was ratified in 2022, so 2027, but let me double check on that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next, I think we're good. Well, Kim can find that. Next page.
Transportation services, which is basically roads patrol, I think, it's actually declining. The biggest, changes there, mentioned, obviously is that from the capital perspective. I think that's.
Yeah, because this is operating team. We'll get to
Yeah,
that.
it's only on
Yeah.
operating. I did include storm sewer, which is actually in environmental services, just to keep this number slides down. So.
Very good. Next. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to say that out loud.
And planning and development, the main piece here is from a transfer to capital on your zoning, which we'll talk in the zoning bylaw review, which is actually one of the capital items, so. That's the main change there.
Okay, we skipped recreation. Does anybody have anything on the recreation page?
I'm sorry.
That's what, no sweat, just, because the arena and all that is in there. No, okay, then you've done planning. Any questions on planning team? Okay, okay, so that's operating budget.
Rate supported budget, obviously is water, wastewater.
Okay,
Um,
if you know that anytime you see rate, you know that that's the majority of us in the room. Barely.
I think, I'll put it over to Peter if there's anything in particular he wants to highlight.
Yeah.
On water, wastewater.
Any concerns there, team? No, okay. Then we'll go to water.
So water, has a couple of pieces, that, obviously are, increases that, in terms of instrumentation and et cetera. So there are some changes there, but other than that, it's obviously it's rate supported, so,
Just got a question about water meters. So really to Peter, because it's here, I wouldn't remember it otherwise. Is there light at the end of the tunnel when we'll be done installing the new meters?
To your worship, apologies. I think the schedule is 2028 right now.
Okay,
We are trying to get in as many as we possibly can.
Of course, I know that.
And, I mean, it's getting there.
good, okay, brilliant, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Crapper.
It's, in part largely for people watching, but I had to ask about this today. Contracting services new comes up repeatedly on a bunch of slides. And is it my understanding correct that what that is a breaking out of the costs associated with some of our financial management systems in the organization as a whole?
yes, for you, yes, that's exactly it.
Exactly, yeah.
So
Which is what we want to do.
A question I get asked a lot is, what did you do with your treasurer? How are you doing that? And I think people will want to hear what our planning is on that. I'm not sure when that time makes sense to you to do, but because it is, and I learned through our CAO how we wisely take that central function and cost it out to various parts of the organization, and the total bill is shared therefore by all different budgets.
Right. When we have a contract is the answer to your first question.
Excellent.
Okay. Next page. Difficult to answer that at this point in time, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's water.
It's water.
Okay, so those are all rate supported.
Any questions on the wastewater team? Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, now we get into
Capital.
it. Now we
Much
get
more fun.
I know.
Capital.
Well, you know, you go to a lot of councils. This council reads every piece of paper they get before a meeting.
That's great.
Yeah, it's terrific. It's just terrific.
And I might say as well that many of our questions, because there's some discussion, or like, it isn't all just the questions here that we're getting our
Sure.
answers to. There's lots of resources from staff that help us understand what it is
For sure.
that we're looking at.
Yeah, they take a real hard look at it if and they just don't understand. They'll send that off to the CAO. CAO will either source it out to Peter or answers to everybody so that others were having the same question, they get the information. So they're a really well-informed professional council for sure. Okay, we get into some photos now.
So, so what I've done, I've tried to, as you saw at the beginning, we have changed the way the budget, is put together so that you can clearly see what's been tax supported versus rate support on your capital. So the idea here is that you transfer the tax revenue to fund your capital. So if you don't end up doing the capital project, or if it's less, obviously you're gonna transfer less tax levy to those capital funds. And what you typically then do is end up at the end of the year determining what are you gonna do with that surplus. Is it unexpected capital? You may put it into a reserve for the next year. Because if it's a project that doesn't get done, it doesn't necessarily mean that it shouldn't be done. It may become a liability for the next year. So that's the kind of the concept, so that you're always balancing your capital fund should always come to zero. So that's really what we've done here.
Okay.
Okay, next slide. So the reserve continuity schedule, this is a draft. Very important to know that this started from the 2022 financial statement balances. There were some, a few areas that have not been reconciled yet.
Okay.
Once we've done the 2023 financial statement completed, and a lot of the transfers from the reserves in 2023, 2024, based on the budget, have not yet been done in the system. So, based on what we know, at the end, projecting, assuming that the capital budget goes forward as presented, which may or may not, and the utilization of reserves, the balance at the end of 2025 would be 1.2 million without the reconciliation of some of those reserves. So that's kind of I would say the low end. Okay, so because it appears to me that some of the transfers to reserves have not been completed in 2023, 2024. So
Right, okay. So we know what's draft.
yeah. Okay, and next slide. So the tax supported capital projects, and I'm going to, this is the summary. What we have done is shown what the project description is, and it's been given a project number. Now, one of the things that should happen is if a project is multi-year, it should keep the same number, so that you do know that it started in 2023 and then we move forward and keep the same project number, so that you can do a report on the entire project, multi-year project. So that's kind of a major shift from what you currently see. And so then we looked at what is the capital cost in 2023, and we've projected that out for 2025, sorry, excuse me, 2026 and 2027. Based on the project and any financing implications. So in cases where the recommendation is to debt finance, as an example, the capital budget includes the cost of the interest to fund that in the following years. So that will go into the operating budget. Okay.
Yeah.
So you will see that recommendation around debt, transfers from reserves, grants and contributions that are anticipated, and the net. So as I mentioned, it's 208,000 that is based on tax levy projects. And there's a slide for each one. I think the staff are going to go through the projects. So
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. You can take a break. Don't go far. Don't go far, though. All right, and some of this is, just ask if there's questions, so I'm not sure who's gonna do it. But, so we are at the feasibility study. Any comments or questions? All right, we are at Munisoft modules modernization. Any questions?
And these are all things, again, for the audience that we've discussed in detail, many of them, which has been.
And they
helpful
all
to
have
us.
access
Yeah,
to this
yeah,
report, but they're not gonna go through the detail of them.
Yeah.
But I am giving the title if they're following along.
Yeah,
All right. Facilities structural engineering review. A little bit,
I have a question on that.
yes, go ahead, please.
Just, I thought we had, through you too, Peter, I guess. I thought that was what we had already done, like when they came in and did that engineering review of all our facilities, did they not?
Go ahead, Peter.
It's more the next steps. Now it's trying to narrow down and implement some of those specific OSHA and AODA standards.
Okay,
So I think that.
okay, so it's phase 2 of the same project.
Yeah, I think it's really smart, looking for growth. All right, Spring Street reconstruction. Any questions on that or no? Very good. bottoms out every time he comes out of the driveway. No, everybody's fine, go ahead.
I
That's
think-
what Eric wanted.
I think just an emphasis on this one. This is just a portion for anybody that's watching. This is just a portion of Spring Street. Some people have been asking about when that is gonna happen, but we should emphasize that this is just a portion of it.
So it's 120 meters on George Street from Church. So Peter, just kind of give us George Street to Church Street, or George Street to the creek. Like, give us a better idea.
I'll start with your worship, just by saying we're still actively chasing grants that we can get. We have not received any grants for this project, so we are biting this off in little chunks. So this will be at
The intersection.
least the sidewalk and curb on the south side of Spring between George and Church, similar to what's already been done on the north side from Concession to Church.
Good.
This will also replace the stormwater works on the south side, so new catch basins, storm pipe. And we'll also we're expected to do the intersection
Good.
of George and Spring, where it is the worst. So that's curb on the northwest corner, as well as the areas already mentioned. Asphalt, at least in those sections there.
Okay, good question again, Joe, like, 3 in a row. But that's, certainly helpful to know what's involved, and see if you can beat that.
No, I'm not gonna do that. Just through you, Madam Mayor, is there a timeline for that, Peter? People are just asking.
Go ahead.
Through your worship, this we're at the budget stage now here in May.
Okay.
We are hoping to bring back a plan for actually implementing this.
Good.
It's intended, this would be a lot more of those internal work than normal. So whereas instead of hiring an engineering and hiring a general contractor to do the whole thing, we'll likely general ourselves. We will have to general ourselves based on this amount. This is similar project to we did with Glen Street Pumping Station, where we looked after engaging the subs and making sure it was working internally. But this summer to fall would be the expected completion date.
Yeah, and it comes back to Tammy's point of starting our 26 budget in the fall. There's a zillion reasons to do it. Capital's one, is that then you have a better sense and you can line your contractors and subs up before all the big municipalities. Any other questions on this one?
Just
Okay,
a comment, I think it's a good idea to utilize the expertise you have, and especially in this case, it's kind of groundbreaking for our public utilities and our using our own people.
yeah,
And who I think are well qualified to manage the project, so. I
just
think
make sure they charge their hours to the project so that we're talking about OSIF and whatever, they got it.
But I
Okay.
can see some big cost savings there for us.
Yeah, and really, it's, any one of us who's in that part of town, we get questioned all the time. I'm sure they're banging on your door, or you hear them bottoming it out.
And if I may just add to that, because I was questioned about this one today, and it's part of it, like, there are lots of streets that need work, but you gotta start somewhere. And that particular work is in process, and it's a main kind of entrance way for a lot
It
of
is,
people to the
yeah.
town. And so, yeah, and planning is, I know on your team's radar is the whole town, but you can only do what you can do.
Yeah,
That's a priority for us.
yeah, and I think it's a risk for us as well, yeah. Okay, so that's looking good. The next is plow truck. Any comments or questions on that? Like, is this pre-approved? Like, just jog my memory. Did we pre-approve this one?
Yeah.
Okay,
But,
so,
Also, we have it.
yeah, my next point was gonna be before somebody jumped in and said, I don't know if we need it. I wanted to say it's out in the back here.
But I have
That's
to
correct.
comment because again, somebody was talking about this today, and I think the more you look at this villages of capacity, and to your point about us and Public Works looking after our own, you've got to invest in the equipment needed, and you don't wait till it breaks down to invest, to your point earlier. I mean, it's about using dollars as we have them wisely for the better interest, for the interests of everyone, and this
Yeah.
is an example.
We don't have big spenders here at all.
Okay.
All right, and sadly, we're now going to the recreation truck. Please, does anybody have any comments against this? Sorry.
Could we not just donate it? and get
I
it?
know. You are a good sport, Mr. Chisholm. All right, we're gonna just move on there. Spring Street gazebo roof, comments? Go ahead.
Yeah, looking at the budget, I think, $10,000 to me is a hefty amount. There must be a little bit more to it than just the shingles. I'd ask you, your worship, if there is more to the project
Okay,
than I see there. It's a very, very small roof.
is it really 10,000 or is that the best guess? I mean, I think the council's probably hoping to reduce to 6.1 somewhat, so $10,000 is sitting there. Is that really what that little roof's gonna cost?
So
I think we all kind of reacted to this one.
that was a quote we received. If my best estimate would be just based on the gables and the edges and the troughs, that was based on an estimate we have. If we get an estimates that come lower, then we would be able to, but that is based
That's
on
it?
estimate.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough, good answer. Anything else? She's got a quote, not to know. Thank you so much for that. Library entrance renovations. So this is all grant. I guess we can just pass it by. We've got the grant, no comments. Harbor replacement dock phase 1. Venture will be issued in 2026. Okay, let's have a little bit, I know we've had some discussion, but a little bit more. Go ahead, Councillor Erdwan.
So the harbor is something that I get asked a lot about, and a lot of questions about what's happening with upgrades. When are we doing X? When are we doing Y? So it might be worthwhile through you, Madam Mayor, through Recreation Manager, maybe if you could just provide a little background on what exactly the expansion phase 1 is and what's involved.
Sure,
Go ahead.
through you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, it's a multi-phase approach to a multi-year project to hopefully at the end of it all, increase the capacity of the harbor to handle more boats. Just with the growth of the community and a continuing wait list of 40+ people. The multi-year plan was to eventually get to a place where we have a lot more space for primarily seasonal style boaters, which in the case of us and our harbor budget is a good thing because those seasonal boaters are guaranteed revenue income that can start paying back on the cost of these 3 different phases over multiple years. The first phase is more though to look at finishing off what had already been done. So the grant that we received a few years ago, which replaced a major section of the island docks, turned it into a beautiful new facility. We didn't get to finish that whole project. So that picture is an example of one of those sections of the dock on the island that didn't get done. We're trying our best to sort of put Band-Aids on it for now, but it's getting to a point where it will really need to be addressed or we could come into some serious problems.
So this is unusual, because I was texting Kim, because I don't remember us getting this briefing. And that's part of the challenge that you have here, Chris, is it's probably a great idea. But an oral briefing on a significant capital project. Yeah, have we had this briefing?
Yes. Yeah.
Did we pre-approve it? I thought you said no.
Council didn't pre-approve it, but they did receive the briefing note with the expectation that it would be discussed at the budget deliberation.
So year 1 of the briefing is in 2026, not 2025. Right?
You get that slide.
Yeah, 2026.
Yeah.
2026.
Good slide back.
Okay, I'm just confused why the status says pre-approved. So just help me here, team.
Peter?
It says pre-approved for $270,000 and the first year is 2026. So something's not lining up for me and I'm not sure what.
So, Your Worship, so it should be pre-approved, sorry,
That's
well,
probably- Yeah.
I
Probably
reviewed
my,
those,
that was probably my. Oh, that's why I'm texting Kim, like, I don't remember approving.
so it's not pre-approved. And so phase 1 is in the budget, the final plan, this was from the expansion modernization plan for the feasibility. The final plan has not been brought to council for approval. However, the expectation is that the budget required for phase one will be $270,000. Specifically, as what Chris mentioned before, phase one is enough expansion docks to fund both the expansion and the last bit of island docks that are required based on the failure of those island docks. So the amount being requested in the budget is $270,000. The final layout and look is still subject to council approval. The whole project is still subject to council approval, even if passed in the budget this year. The reason why it's listed in 2026, perhaps you'd be better able to answer this, Tammy, but the work won't happen to the extreme end of 2025. So we'll still need to come back and get the project approved by council for this late fall, early winter, going into 2026. But we have to talk about it this year, or we won't be able to have the docks repaired until the season of 2027, which they're already at the failure point, so.
So in our, going back to the spreadsheet here now on capital, is the 270 for the harbor? It's not showing in there, so what are we approving for this year? Coming to you, Tammy, yeah.
Yeah, so what I had made the recommendation was to get the approval to move forward so that you could get the plans put together. It doesn't sound like there'd be any costs or it'd be minimal in 2025. And it would be debentured. So likely you'd be, if all of the costs came in, say, December of 2025, you'd debenture starting January of 2026. So I think the request is to approve to move forward on the project. And so there's really no financial implication in 2025 at this point.
Okay, that's interesting. We're gonna have to chew on this a bit. Because we are approving the project to proceed. If we're giving the thumbs up that go ahead with the work and we'll be prepared to debenture the 270 in the fall so that when the bills come in January or whatever, we have the money. Is that what you're saying, Tammy?
What I'm suggesting is that, from what we understand, is that there would be very little in terms of 2025. So it would become, you probably would have a little bit of self-financing perhaps, depending on how much that is, but the debenture wouldn't start until 2026. But the key piece is that the staff can't move forward without some kind of approval in the
Okay.
budget.
And so what's the cost for 2027?
It'll be euros and repayment costs.
So the whole project. I think we need to see that briefing note again, because I'm on board to support this. I just don't know what I'm supporting yet. Because we've got a phase one, what does phase two look like, what's involved in that? And we have not, we have not routinely done our next year's budget in the previous fall, so that's causing me some anxiousness as well. So I just think we need to know what is in the mind of Peter and Chris, that if we give the thumbs up for this, what are we buying into multi-year? It's kind of the first multi-year project we've had as well. So I feel I'm on thin ice. Councillor Card, then Councillor Aragon. I just want the staff to know, I think I'm in, but I don't know what I'm in for.
I think, recalling the presentation at the briefing, I asked the question of, there's phase 1, 2, and 3, and there's also repairs to the current. And my question to Peter at the time was, why are we going out of sync here? We have a phase and repairs. And I think a good part of the justification in his mind, or the explanation that I received, there's, as soon as the project's done, there's instant earning potential there. So it's kind of, I don't think it would maybe pay for itself completely, but it would certainly contribute significantly to the cost of the project. I think that was the reasoning for rejigging the order in which things happened there. So, but I think the whole project was close to $1 million, was it not, Peter?
See, we're going by memory here, team, and we can easily just bring this piece back next
Yeah,
week with the
yeah,
report so that we're clear.
Mhm.
I don't wanna guess. I don't wanna guess, and as Counselor Cart's talking, I'm remembering the conversation about there would be revenue generated the first year. Once it's installed, there would be revenue, but I'm kinda hazy. I promised I'd come to you, Counselor Glenn.
Yeah,
I think I wanna see the report.
I think it'd be good to see the report again. But I'm picking up on what Tammy said. The cost for the 2025 budget is zero. Is that-
Correct.
So if I'm not sure why it's there, if the cost for the 25 budget is zero. I'm struggling with that part of it.
Go ahead.
So the reason actually originally there were some funds in there. The reason we put it in was so that you can, at least approve the, start of the project so that they can get the information that they need to get, to move forward. It would be no different than if you were to, let's just suppose you're gonna do.
That's why you made it pre-approved. I get it
Exactly,
now.
so
Okay.
if you were to, similarly, when you, look at, doing a request for tender, without an approval in a budget, you can't issue a request for tender. So how is the staff gonna be able to issue a request for tender if they don't have an approval to do so? So that's kind of the concept.
So would everybody be agreeable that we put this on Tuesday's agenda, but we get the report to us? I think it's gonna go, because I don't remember a lot of pushback when we had the original briefing. Because I get it now, we are giving what Councillor Crawford doesn't like to do. We are giving $270,000 pre-approval for the 2026 budget. With a plan, we're not hanging on the end of a rope. And that's a bit of a big leap for us. But I think we can make the argument, but it would be nice just to jog everybody's memory on what the whole plan is. Is that all right with the team? Okay, and with you? Yeah, sorry. Good. A good discussion, and totally get the pre-approval idea, and it told great rationale.
Yeah.
We are growing as a village, you see, and so those are the questions that we have to ask. All right, so we'll bring that back next week. Okay, so the next then is Harbor Marine Pedestal, so $6,000. Anybody got concerns? No, he's paid 270 for it. I'm not gonna quibble about $6,000 to make it safer. Go ahead.
But just to describe this, from what I understand, we already have the equipment, do we not?
Yeah,
Okay, so it's a done deal.
okay, perfect, thank you. All right, Arena GHG plan. You're gonna have to walk us through slowly here, because walk us through slowly, we were, I just have to say this out loud, and Mr. Evans, I don't even wanna look at him when I say it. Because when the GHG plan came to us, many of us thought there wasn't a snowball's chance in what, that we would get it. And now we have it. So the 265, can we talk, Tammy, can you talk about how do we fund that, what's involved? And help us understand these are some significantly high numbers. We're thrilled we got the grant, but what's involved for 25?
Through you, Mayor. So, I will let Peter
Sure.
talk about this, but, the belief is that the grant is an 80-20 split. And so because there's, the grant funding will come over a period of time, we're recommending you self-finance it through reserves in 2025. You can then, through that process, potentially pay that reserve back once
The grant.
once the grant, comes through. But I think there's some upfront, work that has to be done, but I'll let Peter explain.
Okay.
Yeah, so because this came late in this whole process, the village's share is being proposed to be funded from the Arena Reserve and the Efficiency Reserve.
Okay.
As they fit so perfectly hand in glove to this project, that every dollar we could get out of those two amounts that was reasonable is 20 cents on the dollar.
Okay.
So the 265, the 53, as is in the right-hand table, 53,000 is out of reserves. and the 212,000 of the grants. The work that really needs to be done this year is the engineering and design and speccing and scoping out of the entire ice plant,
Okay.
including the
So exciting.
HVAC that's tied into it. We're also hoping to get some lighting done, some plumbing done this year as there are low cost items in the grant, but also see quick returns. Change an LED light bulb out, we know it might take 7 years to pay it off, but we see those savings in the first year, of course. The other component that needs to be done is just looking at the facility itself, the structure of the facility, just make sure that those projects that were listed in the GHG plan will be able to be handled without any other issues with the building. And we are still also actively pursuing grants that are stackable, so we can make that number bigger and make our share lower.
So what we heard was the 265 will be covered by reserves and grant.
Yes.
Oh, okay, everybody all right with that?
Totally.
Sure, okay, good. Was easier than the harbor.
If I may, I remember
Yes.
this presentation, and what was really compelling to me were the savings in heating,
Yeah.
savings like the heat recovery stuff, like, I actually thought when he presented, I had this feeling that.
Did you
we
think we
would
get
get
it?
it. I
Okay,
think
I did.
It's such a good, exciting fit, and
I-
it's progressive stuff.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think it should, one of these projects that our community, we should really solace a thing we're doing environmentally, and it's the head of the pack on this.
yeah, it's great. Particularly when we know that we're not taxing people this year for it, we're finding other ways.
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody's fine with that then? All right, so go ahead.
Somebody should commend Mr. Evans and his crew for,
Yeah.
because we all know how much, having had a little bit of experience with
Yeah.
grant applications, there's a lot of man hours in that, so
Yeah.
kudos.
Well done, particularly when your mayor didn't think we were gonna get it. Really well done. Okay, good job. Yeah, Marty believed in me. The next one is the ice resurfacer. Is this the same idea that there's nothing in 25, but we need to give the go ahead? And how will the 170 be funded in 26? Tax money on taxes?
It's recommended that it would be a debenture, the amount will determine what it's going to be. It's somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 to 170, ice resurfacers, or it depends on the model, blah, blah, blah. But my understanding is that.
This is Zamboni? Oh, gotcha.
Or,
Yeah, I was-
whatever.
It's on
Whatever
its
comes
list
out in
for
the
sure.
tender.
Yeah, of course.
But it takes 11 months to get a delivery, so without going out, without having approval to go for a tender, you wouldn't know the year amounts.
Gotcha.
And so, and I have clients that that's an accurate timeframe.
Oh, this
Takes
is
that long,
thrilling.
yeah.
Councilor.
Just a question, through your worship, is this the electric version?
So the answer to that question, so this is just, as mentioned, so we can go for tender. So we'll still work on the specs to get them out. This is also has potentially grant supported, so one of the grants we
Okay.
applied for, the GHG, the grant, the GICB grant that we have confirmed we received. The Zamboni wasn't eligible, the rice resurfacer, could be Olympia, wasn't eligible. So we haven't answered the specs on the electric. If the grants come in, that will likely be the case confirmed. If it's not, we'll be doing that based on the cost coverage. So we'll actually come back to council and ask for actual permission for this project.
Okay.
So we'll get the principal.
Yeah.
But we don't have permission to.
Permission to go to
Spend.
RFP in here. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, or tender. Okay, that's exciting.
Mhm.
I think that your family's gonna be excited about that.
Excellent.
And that.
And if I may, one of the things that the ice resurfacers are great advertising.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, for sure.
Easy donor.
Okay, so that's good. We're moving along. Arena canteen renovations. So this is a bit of back and forth, I think with FODA. $50,000 to get the work done. Is that actually, is that the amount that is gonna come out of our budget, 50,000? And we're gonna get FODA's contribution on top of that? Or is it a $50,000 upgrade? Mr. Chisholm,
Sorry, and yeah, it's an upgrade to the.
of 50,000,
Correct.
and some of it may be FODA supported?
Yeah, it's completely photos.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so, this is supported by FODA 100%, whatever this is. Okay, very good.
Yet it says it's reserves,
The photo reserves,
photo reserves.
There you go.
which are not technically reserves.
Yeah.
No.
Right.
Separate, it'll be a separate bank account, we get this whole thing straightened out. Right, okay, so no problem with that, team, that's good, good. Had a presentation on that. Zoning bylaw review. Oh, yeah, okay, any concerns on that? We know we have to do it within a certain period of time after the OP. Okay. Somebody's got a question? No, okay. Welcome signage. So this is the same idea, it'll come out of the levy in 26. But what, we need a year to plan?
So, through you, your worship, I believe the original plan was that we were going to have some, included in 2025, but decided to, I think there's maybe some design work that might have to
Oh,
be done,
Peter.
I'm not 100%
Okay,
sure.
yeah,
No, no.
Peter.
Yeah.
Your worship, so this is like for the projects, these are just things we've seen, so this got kicked again at staff level, but
Oh, it's deferred.
it's
Okay.
just kicked again, like it's,
Okay.
we know the cost, we have a supplier, we know the design, but it's an extra increase on tax, so it wasn't included
I
in
see.
25, and this isn't approving it in 2026.
No, I see that. I didn't know status is deferred. So you want us to go through these one by one?
I think this is the only one that's.
Oh, okay.
I think so too.
All right. Too bad we couldn't get a sponsor to help us with that.
There you go.
Jackie Brady's opening upstairs.
Yeah, okay. So that's the end of it. So now we're at the capital budget for water wastewater. And so we're wrapped up capital other than wastewater.
Mhm.
Guys, that's good?
Yeah.
Go ahead then, Tammy.
I think that's, we'll just go through the individual
Okay.
projects, they
Fair
are
enough.
rate supported, so they don't hit the
Yeah,
tax.
right.
Other than there are a couple in here that are both tax supported and rate supported,
Okay,
so the asset management plan, I think is up, yeah. So it is divided up between,
right,
and it is a mandatory
Mandatory.
requirement, so.
okay. Sooner or later, we're gonna get it right, team. Environmental studies, services, I'm sorry.
So this is a truck,
There's
I'll
no,
let
no,
Peter talk about that.
We're through, this is the replacement to the vehicle that would be moved from the ratepayers. This is tied to the report that came in February.
right.
So the most cost effective way, most efficient way is to transfer the existing utility vehicle to the wreck and replace the utility
Oh,
vehicle.
yeah, we just wanted to say it one more time. All right, and it's electric truck, just in case people didn't see that, that's exciting. And back to Councillor Crapper's constant vigil in all things green, that's great. Charging station here, oh, you
I'm
go.
gonna speak to this, sorry.
Okay.
So that's a hangover in the note. So we haven't, that's why that finally,
Oh.
we are looking at either electric or diesel because of our ability to source fuel and get fuel at a good
Oh,
price.
okay, fair
So I
enough.
actually am so council knows, I am finding that the electric vehicles are actually lower price than the diesels now for the work.
Yeah,
But that was not meant to be, that's not set. It's like the Zamboni, it's like saying Zamboni.
Okay.
That's not set just yet.
okay.
Before any of this money is spent, the report will come back to
Come back to
council
council, yeah,
with the purchase request, the business case, the recommendation for doing this or that, but
okay,
yeah.
Okay, good. good. Boy, that truck for Chris better last a long time.
Beautiful truck.
Unisoft, okay, makes sense. No comments on that? No. Used valve trailer, recommended conditional on offer, go ahead.
Yeah, council's approved a couple of times in the past couple of years when a used unit has come up.
Yeah.
We haven't been successful for any of them. But particularly the last time, we didn't have enough time to come to council, even in closed session with a more fulsome report. So this way, we do have that in principle, approval and a budget, to go on for 2025. If no units become available, or no decent units become available,
Go on reserves.
then it would just go straight to reserves. This, unit, is two primary uses. It's the catch basin maintenance that we are now undertaking. And then we've found, we were able to borrow a unit from a neighboring municipality, and we were able to replace a number of curb stops within the village that would normally be $4,000 or $5,000 and about one per day. And we borrowed one last year. We completed 3 curb stop repairs for about $700, $800. Not including step time, but both would be included in that. So these units new are about 130,000, so.
Go ahead.
One of the things we learned from you recently through you, Madam Mayor, was, that we have the capacity to do the catch basin maintenance. And this is, as I understand it, the tool that will allow your team to be managing and maintaining those stormwater ponds in-house.
Go ahead.
So this is one of the tasks that we'll be able to do.
Yeah.
This will bring, one of those tasks fully in-house versus contracting it out, so we end up seeing savings.
Yeah.
And a bit more flexibility. So this is one of the tasks. If we don't find a used unit, we will just be contracted. So we'll partner with another municipality to contract that specific item out, but it is an ongoing item.
Super.
So,
Yeah.
Good, alrighty. We'll move on to the public watching. We're at page 75 of 83. EA amendment, wastewater treatment. Go ahead.
So through your worship, so this one should actually be already pre-approved. This is the EA project. This is just what's left over from the
Right.
Greer Galloway work. It's funded by the connection fees, and the original project amount was about 77,000.
Right, okay. Any issues with that? Okay.
This one.
This is every year, right? Yeah, did you warn Tammy that we would all snicker when this one came on? Okay, well, we're snickering.
Well, he snickered, but he-
Yeah, okay. So we get it. We know the money's been there since, 1902. All right. Thank you. Thank you for your continued diligence on it. It's
Yes.
very important work. We often hear, questions about the water, and so we know that it will certainly be improved once this work is done. Okay, water meters, oh, weird,
No.
yeah. Everybody's all right with that, continuing to move along with them, good. Water tower upgrades, it's recommended, and it's a $5,000, any issue there? Okay. I'm sorry, my computer's thinking about.
Okay.
Yeah, you go.
So, there's no more questions about capital, so based on, the, calculation of the 6.15, that is a $1.394 million, levy. This is your typical median property. This is calculated by from your assessment. So on that basis, the average, monthly single home would be about $13 a month. So that's how the calculation works out. And so the percent change in the tax itself is actually less than that, so. The next slide will actually based on average as opposed to median. And again, depending on the class, the residential class is at $12.42 based on a average monthly impact.
Could we go back one slide just for a minute? So just wanted to flag for the rest of the team. Because somebody will say to you, what house is worth $234,000? Tammy, go ahead and fill that blank in so that they are better armed when they get that question.
So based on your worship, as mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation, current value assessments currently are based on 2016 values.
Those were the days.
Those were the days. So, I mean, if they had revalued them in 2025, they would have gone up, but their percentage change would have gone down in
Right.
terms of the tax rate.
So it isn't
So-
accurate when you think of in 16, how many houses were around $250,000? So
Yeah.
it's a good figure. It's not a fudge figure.
No.
It's a good figure to use. I just wanted you to understand that it's based on the CBA. Thank you.
Yes, no, good point, yeah.
Okay.
So this slide actually shows you, got 514 properties in the village right now on the roll. And of course, the change being that 80,820, because of course you have 80,000 plus growth. So
Yeah.
that is why the actual tax rate change is not 6%, so. Any other questions about that? So, before I move on?
So so that's where we're sitting, team. We'll go back
Yes.
one slide just for a sec,
Yes.
so mull that over. That the percentage increase is 6.2%, having been able to factor in 80,000, which is about six something percent, due to the growth. So 6.2. We've gone through everything bit by bit, one by one. Do you have a sense of the percentage increases, like, so contextually, we're in a bit of a bubble. Do we have a set, is that in your next slide by any chance? Okay, do you have a sense of, how people settled around us?
I do.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the card.
I did some research today and, the very extreme was 10%, but that was far west of us, thankfully. But, right in our vicinity, I think we're between like 4 and 5.8, somewhere. That seems to be the, and for various reasons. I mean, when you'd have to look at each municipality. But, when you start with 2+% of, inflation, it's pretty hard to be creative.
True enough, okay. So just wanted that context for everybody. You don't have to decide tonight and there have been very few people watching tonight, but they will likely watch at their leisure. You may hear some things between now and next week, but any concerns at the 6.2, I'm going through what we've gone through. Go ahead, Councilor.
Yeah,
Crawford.
in fact, I'm the guy who usually does, but, it's hard, it's really, it was a great presentation and I can't find anything that, isn't necessary, like, there's no frivolous separate, the truck. But this guy, look at him. He needs a truck. 6.1 is reasonable, and I did look around to see
Okay.
what I think the great news story is the growth. So
Yeah.
people really have worried about that. Is it really going to make a difference? And the fact that we've got 80 grand, I mean, it'd be great if it was more, but it's 80 grand and it allows us to be in the ballpark and do this significant work. Of course, we've got worries about the deficit stuff, and we'll figure that out. But for the moment, and I like that it's long-term planning. A number of the things are phased over
Mhm.
years, and that's about multiple year budgeting. So,
Yeah.
no, I'm feeling great about it, actually.
And it follows 2 years where you remember the capital budget, everything got chopped, it was just what was really broken or gonna break that they had to replace. Go ahead, Councilor Carr.
Yeah, just to, I just mentioned in passing, I spoke to you about it. I watched a video on YouTube about, not about the numbers, but about the reasons for the numbers. And, the key spokesperson, I can't think of her name, but she
Jones.
actually works for works for mayor on when she wears her other hat.
Yeah.
But,
Lindsay.
I think it's a video well worth everybody watching. I sent the link to Joe. I don't know if you got a chance or not, but it explains some of the problems that municipalities run into with government rules and regulations and, like I talked about the studies. Well, basically, we have little to say about that. We're told that if we want to do this, we do a study and you work out how you're going to pay for it. And that's nothing unique, anywhere in Ontario, but every municipality has something to say. But there were some other key people there too. It was kind of a documentary or a news presentation, but I found it very, very interesting because it was plain English And it did describe Westport's trials and tribulations to a T, not to mention everybody else's. And they talk about things like when you start with a high inflation number and a COLA number that's getting up there and up there. I mean, the things that are not discretionary anymore are getting fewer and fewer. So I agree with Councillor Crapper that I'd like to see it lower for sure. But looking at every line there, I didn't see one thing that isn't a productive addition to our budget and gonna show good returns to the village, so. And I'd also say that back in the pandemic,
Yeah.
we had a year there when it was a zero increase.
Yeah.
And after listening to this presentation from these people, they convinced me of the fact that we did a disservice.
Yeah.
And the statement, you pay me now or pay me later, is becoming more and more apparent to me every time I look at these numbers. So, I mean, it was a great gesture, and I honestly, I tried to drive it as much as I could, but I would never do it again.
Okay. So this was Steve Bacon on TVO. And so I sent the link, after I talked to you, I sent the link to Kim, she'll circulate it to, it's only 40 minutes. And let's put it on our website, because we're talking about it here, and when other people ask you, you know, what about this and the other thing? There's 4 panelists. For sure, I thought that the director of policy for AMO was really on point, and she explained things very, very well. Which will help you if people ask you, what about this? Then you've got some answers from another expert. Okay, so for pulling it together, you've got a couple of other things. Let's go to slide 81, just your recommendations, Tammy. And we've kind of tightened up the budget, but now this is more some of the process things you talked about at the beginning.
For sure. So a couple things I've kind of highlighted them through the presentation. So, you know, part of any long-term strategy is really that reserve policy. So once you've done your asset management plan, developing a reserve policy is really important. Really you're not in a good position to even look at self-financing until you get that policy. So it's important. Monitoring market rates is gonna be important for your debt. Your Infrastructure Ontario is always gonna be your best option. So if it meets the requirements, yes, it's a little more work to set it up in terms of a bylaw, but it's always gonna be cheaper than going to a bank, so. And obviously, over this next year, or, you know, I did the interest rates based on current market. Let's hope interest rates decline, so that'll be good. Short-term self-financing, you know, a perfect example, and again, your reserve policy really should talk about self-financing. How are you gonna do it, how are you gonna pay it back?
Yeah.
Development charges are obviously your friend. I mean, they've changed development charges significantly now. I mean, it is, you know, the legislation has changed. It's not quite the same as it used to be, but you know, I know they're under development. They're gonna be important, for sure.
I'm pretty optimistic. You know, I've been working with the ministry on that.
Yeah,
They're not asking municipalities to reduce them. They're looking for them to be not at when you pull the building permit, but at occupancy.
Yeah.
So I think, and AMO's working with OPPI and with planners and builders, which is important, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there was a knee-jerk reaction
Originally,
which is typical
Yeah.
in policy change.
That took a while, but I think this is a good plan.
So, and user fees we've talked about, definitely, you know, you're gonna be in a better position to start looking at proper fee study and look at policy around that, and we talked about debentures, so that's some things to in terms of the work plan to look at for sure. Next slide.
Okay. So
And, yeah,
were we to pass these recommendations tonight? I don't think I have motions. I just have to you go back one, Kim? This one here, this is, because this is part of what Councillor Crapper's talking about. But it's next year, okay,
It's
all right,
just-
all right, so I understand.
It's just
that.
to- it's
Had
just to
remind
put it
me
on
here
the
what you said,
radar,
yeah, okay. Work to be done, but can't be done yet, gotcha. So the recommendation here is, even though we don't have the harbor report in front of us, are you comfortable recommending this to go to council next week? That's what this recommendation is, Jean? Yes, okay, so let me see, let me get and part of that recommendation is depending upon getting the harbor study route, just so we can review that. So the motion is moved by Councillor Cardy, seconded by Councillor Aragona. The council, the council recommend approval at their next regular council meeting of the 2025 operating and capital budgets with a tax levy increase of 1.394 million.
Oh, tax
No,
levy.
tax levy, yes.
Yeah. That's my bad.
That's okay. I had to play that slow in my
Yes.
head, it's getting late. With a tax levy of 1.394 million, representing a tax rate change of 6.15%, resulting in a residential tax rate of 0.011306656. As we've discussed, everybody's fine, so Councillor Carney's gonna, was this side of the
It
room?
was.
It was Councillor Cardy recommending and Councillor Aragona seconding. You're still good now that we've gone through the whole debate? Okay, any comments? Councillor Aragona.
I have a comment about the presentation that we just went through, and I want to thank staff and yourselves for having put this together. This was very well done. I saw in here that there was a lot of planning that was involved in projection in terms of what needs to be done. But the thing that I really appreciated the most was that every time I went through the slides and I had a question, the answers were later in the slides. So I really appreciate the fact that the answers were included as we went through them. It was very important that it was there. So thank you very much to staff and to yourselves for having put this together.
Yeah, and thank you for coming. Like the slide deck was very comprehensive, but it doesn't stand on its own. You know, particularly some of the more technical areas. So thank you both for being here, for all the work that you've done. I've already said that to you, but particularly for tonight. That it's really addressed our concerns. Staff's here, I've seen them smiling from time to time, which is always good. So anybody, anything else they want to weigh in here? Then I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. And I believe that, I'm gonna go back to my agenda. Now we're at the adjournment here. Smith, absolutely. So it is moved by Councillor Aragona, seconded by Councillor Cardy, that this budget meeting held on May 20th, 2025 be adjourned at 8:23 PM. All in favor? And that's carried, and we're adjourned until next week.